All right, welcome back to Let's Talk About the Real Shit. I am Naomi, your host, and my partner in crime here, Lori's in the house with me.
Hey, people.
Awesome. We have a special guest in the house tonight, Granville. Hello, Granville.
Howdy do.
We actually, this is probably part 2 to another episode that we had done. I do believe it's episode 4 with Nancy. And she is the one who nerded out with us on pets and like how people's energy affects our animals. And so Nancy from Fang. So Fang is a pet store and a plant store, garden supply store, I should say, in Portland. And I've been going to this store for 2 years, which is awesome. I love them. I was like, I'd be friends with this girl, plants and pets. So we brought in Nancy. We kind of nerded out on the animal part. So we brought Granville in tonight because this man has got a green thumb and he is in the garden department. So we're excited to kind of nerd out on plants and hear his story and how he got into it. And so that'll be really fun. But before we go there, we're going to start our podcast off with Lori and her badass thought of the day.
Okay, are you ready for this one?
Yeah.
I'm ready.
There's nothing as unstoppable as a freight train full of fuck yeah!
Super true. I can relate to that.
I love that.
I got you laughing.
Yeah, that's really funny. There you go. I don't even think that there's that's enough said about
It's
that.
complete with the whole rock out.
Totally.
Gotta rock it.
Oh, that's good stuff. So Granville, who are you?
I am Granville, otherwise backwards known as Elvenarg.
Awesome.
And I don't know. Like you said, I work at Fang. I kind of got brought in to develop the garden side of that business, which didn't exist previously. I have worked for Nancy for a number of years, off and on. And
Like a number of years, like over 10?
let's see. Getting close. Yeah, this might be year 10.
Awesome.
Actually, cumulatively. Yeah, who am I? I was an art school kid from Memphis, Tennessee. And I don't know, I've had a really varied path through life. It's been multicolored for sure. So who am I is one of those questions that I don't encapsulate very, very succinctly in a nutshell.
Well, you're in Portland now. Have you been in Portland your whole life?
No, so I moved to Portland in spring of 2008.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and then moved away for 3 years and then came back because the PNW it's got a hold on me. So.
Yeah, it has a hold on me too. It's the Pacific Northwest for all of you East Coasters.
Sure, dropping the lingo on you.
Awesome. So you have been working in the garden department doing plants, and we would like to kind of get in tonight a little bit about some of your knowledge. You can educate us a little bit about what you do, plants, how you got into it, all that good stuff.
First, I'd like to know a little bit about why did Fang, a pet store, decide to become a pet and garden center?
It's an awesome question. So Salty's is our sister store. It's the store that Nancy started off with years ago. And as our customer base grew, we started getting more and more people who were coming in looking for chicken supplies. And I think this is kind of like where it all started because we started kind of getting to know a little bit of people in the sort of urban farming community and kind of what their needs and concerns are, what they want to know about just even their chicken feed and what's going into it, making sure that they've got organic options. And then the view sort of widened from there. And it was kind of proposed that at the new site for Fang, which we moved into in September, I think 3 years ago now, had a back lot that was just kind of open and not being used and was perfect for a garden center. So Nancy rolled with that idea. And so I think the access point, really to answer your question, was the urban farming.
That's awesome.
Community.
That makes sense in Portland. A lot of people do have chickens here.
Yes, we have chickens in people's yards here in Portland.
Yeah, all
and
over.
Goats and ducks.
Oh, yeah.
And
I love Portland.
a donkey or two.
That's great. That's great. So, and you said you had a couple year break, and I know Nancy was telling us about that. What did you do in those few years?
Yeah, so I had been jonesing pretty hard for a year-round growing season, and kind of dreamed about moving to somewhere accessible to do that. And Hawaii kept coming up, and I'd never been there before. I'd never vacationed there, so I didn't really have any preconceived notions about what life on the island would be like at all. And then I met my now wife in Portland around the time that dream was like really, really grinding on my brain pretty hard. And so we were like, well, yeah, let's do that. And then the house that we were renting got put up on the market, and it kind of pushed our plans to move ahead by like 6 months. So we sold everything we had, and we jumped off to the island.
So did you have anything set up when you got there? Like a farm or an apartment to rent?
Yeah, so we spent a little time road tripping around the country on our way to Hawaii. So we moved to Hawaii kind of via the wrong direction, I suppose you could say. So we left from Oregon, road tripped east, visited family, dropped off our crap at checkpoints along the way. So we made it all the way to Tennessee, where I'm from, and then circled our way back around to Colorado, where my sister-in-law was, and sold our car the day before we hopped on a plane to Hawaii.
Holy shit, that's awesome.
It was fun.
So did you did stuff for gardening there?
Yeah. So while we were on that road trip, we contacted a couple of farmers who seemed to have a pretty good vibe, and had small family farms. So we're talking like 3-acre parcels on the North Shore of Kauai. What they were doing seemed to be pretty well in alignment with our ideas about growing and cultivating. My wife grew up on a sheep dairy farm in Wisconsin, and has been growing her food pretty much since she could walk. So I've actually gotten to learn a lot from my relationship with her. So cool. Between what I had been learning through internships in herbalism, both through an Eastern and a Western lens, and going through massage school, we were kind of in alignment with a very organic practice towards cultivating food. And so we contacted a couple of farmers, and the one that we had initially talked to didn't actually have an opening at the time, but this other fella did. And so we got to the island, and he wasn't ready for us. So you do what you do when you're transient in Hawaii, and you go squat on the beach illegally for a couple of weeks until something comes up, and that's kind of what we did.
Awesome.
So did you end up back at the place? Did he ever become ready for you, or did you find another
Yeah,
place
actually
to
she
go?
did. So we spent... what was that first run? Probably a year, I would say, around about a year on the first farm. And then we actually had to come back to the mainland for a little while for some family health things that we needed to come home for. So we were back on the mainland, just kind of nomading it for about 6 months before we actually got back to the island. And at that time, the initial farm that we had talked to was ready and open for us. So we went there.
So I have a question. You said you had this dream grinding on your brain for a while. So elaborate about the dream. What's the dream?
Okay, so the dream was, to be honest, I was getting a little down because we had too many summers in a row that didn't start until late August. And I grew up in the South where it's hot and humid and you swim all the time, right? So I was kind of starting to get a little like over it, even though my zucchini was off the hook. And I wanted to learn more about cultivating primarily medicinal herbs. And a lot of the herbs that I was introduced to through the Ayurvedic lens are tropical plants. So that's kind of what started the idea. And I was like, oh, that sounds wonderful. I've never lived on a tropical island. I've never lived in the tropics. I've lived in a subtropical area. But I want to see what it's like to really cultivate these things that I can't cultivate here, and what it's like to actually be working the land continuously all year, and how do you manage that? Because, in a temperate zone, you've got fallow seasons, and in a tropical environment, you have to fabricate a fallow season so that you can actually rest your soil. So yeah, I guess the dream was really just to go to Hawaii, grow as much as I could, learn how to surf, and kind of bum around a little bit, in between.
So you're essentially, I mean, it's almost like my dream, and that's to be self-sustained. But to learn the process of getting to that place is a huge part of that is gardening. And it's not, and if you've never done it before, I mean, it's you live and you learn real quick, but it's not always easy. And of course, you have to learn about specifically where you're at and the soil and
what you want to grow and how you're going to use the surplus too.
I know you're supposed to make a garden plan, but I'm sure that a lot of people out there that are just starting.
Oh, let's avoid the supposed to.
I didn't have a plan. Although my husband did his first garden was pretty special for a first garden. If I wanted strawberries, he'd be out there making me a strawberry patch. It was pretty funny. But this was in California, so we actually had to build shade structures for our boxes because it was too hot.
No doubt.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. So that sounds cool in Hawaii. I love that. So then you came back.
Yeah, then we came back.
Awesome. And you've been at Fang?
To get married, actually.
So 2 years ago, or how long have you been back?
No, so we're working on our 4th year back.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So in that time period in Hawaii, around the tropical plants, I've also never had that experience. So tell us a little bit about what you learned about the plants there, if you don't mind.
Okay. Everything grows continuously all the time without stopping. So it's kind of amazing where, by comparison, you're used to seeing things go through kind of like a slower life cycle, where the plant's coming up, like emerging from, the cold season in spring, putting on all of its foliar growth, eventually flowering most likely, and then going to seed and dying back. And in Hawaii and in other tropical areas too, this would be true. You don't have that experience. They're up, they're big, they're only getting bigger, and they just seem to flower and flower and flower again. And it's just continuous.
And this is is this all of the plants?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, some things will kind of outpace themselves that are meant to be grown in a more temperate environment. So, like, we grew a lot of lettuces, for example, on the farms for a CSA, which is community supported agriculture. And those, if we left those in the field, they would throw up a seed stalk. They would get bitter and woody, and then we would have new lettuce growing up because they're an annual. And in an ideal environment, they'll go through their life cycle as fast as they can to reproduce. But a lot of the tropical plants, which we keep as houseplants now, they were going.
So with the lettuce, so that you chop, would you just chop it or harvest the whole thing, pulling the roots up too? Or you just chop it?
We would cut
before
at the base.
The seeds grow, because it happens pretty quick. I mean,
yeah,
I've seen it.
For sure. Yeah. So we had a fairly regimented schedule. The area where we grew most of the food, most of the garden crop, I will say, because there were fruit orchards all around, was about an acre of the 3-acre property. This is on the second farm. And we had everything kind of planted out in what we called blocks. So you'd have a certain number of rows in a block, and everything would be on kind of like a month-long cycle, essentially. So we would harvest on a Tuesday, and then we would till in during that week, and we would throw in like rabbit manure from the rabbits that were kept, or scoop out from the chicken coops to fertilize it, till it all in, rest it for a couple of weeks, and then we would be planting that block again, which would then be ready 4 weeks later. So everything was kind of on a rotational basis. So we would only harvest, say, like 4 blocks at a time.
Okay. So, but with lettuce, you're just chopping it off. So you're kind of just working with the soil and letting the soil around it rest? Or are you pulling out the...
No, we didn't pull it out. So that was part of what would get tilled in. So this is kind of an idea of composting in place. So you're adding biomass into the soil, which is going to help keep your soil aerated, for one. And on a volcanic island, you can wind up with really compacted clay soil, which is not very amenable to roots. spreading out. It's also true here in Portland.
Oh, interesting.
A lot of clay soil. So a lot of people come to us at Fang for soil amendments to help change the structure of their soil to make it better for the plants to live. So yeah, leaving roots in there to decompose, or even starts that don't look like they're going to thrive. You just bury those in and go feed your friends. And so you leave the stuff in there that helps feed the soil microbiome. It just improves your soil health overall. So there's like this big idea out there that you feed the soil, not the plant.
Oh, I like that. I am about to construct an indoor garden that's going to be year round here in this apartment.
Sweet. Okay.
We actually have a neighbor, Granville, and we will eventually introduce the two of you because he is working on this light wave technology.
It's actually patented already.
But brand new. I mean, we're kind of just having the conversations with him for the first time. Essentially, it's this light that's LED light, and it's at all of the perfect wavelengths for photosynthesis to happen. And you can plug it into your wall, and you can do a garden essentially in a dark room year round in half the time.
Wow.
Like he's going from seed to like 12 inches, I think he said.
Yeah,
it's a decent. I saw a
studies were
picture,
on
and I want to say
marijuana
it's,
plants.
yeah.
And
I
it
wanna
went
say,
from
like,
seed to 16-inch leaves in 12 days.
Yeah, in 12 days.
And
That's insane.
seed to bud in 30.
So
In a month?
Yeah.
Whoa.
So this is good stuff. This is like connecting
This is what
people.
we do. We connect people.
So what's neat about this and how he came up with it, and we're going to have him on a podcast here soon, guys. In fact, probably the next one will be him. But the whole point is because he rented a house and this guy was growing marijuana, and it was when it was illegal, but he bailed on his like $5,000 power bill, and he's an electrical engineer. And so our neighbor is the electrical engineer, and he's all, whoa, $5,000? Like, and then he of course sees his lights and he's like, okay, we got to figure this shit out. And so he's designed this light. And so essentially it will consume less power. So he's saying, and I guess we're about to find out this year because I'm going to be I'm getting ready for this garden to be in my room. I want to cultivate a garden year round if I can to prove to people that we can do this. But he says $5 a month extra in power.
Yeah,
it's LED.
That's unprecedented.
Isn't that awesome?
LED is great for sure, just for the energy consumption alone.
Right.
It's low heat output, and
It's like
and you
no
can
heat.
isolate the PARs that you need to grow whatever plant phase you're looking to grow.
Yeah.
That's super cool. What are you hoping to grow?
I want to be able to start with some basics, just like the things that we use the most. So tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, lettuce, because we want to do a lot of salad. I don't think that we'll probably do carrots because that just seems like a weird thing to do inside. Who knows?
I'm wondering about the cucurbits here, like the zucchini and the cucumber. Are you gonna let the cucumber like trail?
I'm gonna vine it. Like I have a whole other room in my room, and it's enormous, and it's way bigger than a closet. Which I mean, when you were growing weed, that's where you were growing it, is in your closet. But I'm actually going to see if I can't conform part of this room completely into an atrium, essentially, where I'm going in there and feeding my family.
That's amazing. Can I
because
come
I
see
want
it when
to?
it's
Of course you
okay.
can.
Well, why don't you be part of the process? It's like we'll have Granville like watching these plants grow and harvesting.
Because this is amazing to be able to show people that we can do it. So I mean.
And when she
on a
says
home
feed
scale.
her family, she's including me in that.
That is totally true.
I just assumed.
But I think that it would, like, we all have house plants, or some of us have some house plants. Some of them, sometimes we buy the strong ones that don't require a lot of attention. I think we all want plants, but I think that we all struggle with the balance of how much light, how much water, what do we do? I mean, these are the basic questions. So I'm excited about this process to come, which is why I'm excited that you're here to pick your brain a little bit. And he's going to get to see this process now. But so what recommendations would you have for me to set up this garden?
So first I would have a question. Are you hoping to do this soilless? Are you going to do it hydroponically?
No, we're going to do it soil. So I was thinking probably big pots. I could probably build some planters, like planter boxes from recycled wood. But I'll be covering my carpet just in case.
So more than that, I would, if you're able to, I don't know I don't know who would provide you this answer, if there's a property management group or something like that, but like how much weight the floor is actually rated for, because soil and water can be really, really heavy. Like a lot of people have tried doing...
It's a good thought.
Yeah, a lot of people have tried doing aquaponic setups, which is where you're growing fish in tandem with your veggies, and the fish water essentially is what fertilizes your plants. But holding tanks of water is really, really heavy, and people have had stuff fall through.
Right.
Yeah.
Literally through the floor.
I'll definitely ask then.
So knowing a little bit about that is good. I mean, I imagine a newer building is going to be rated for well more than would ever be expected to put on the floor, but it might be a good thing to check first, especially knowing that you're going to do soil. If you were going to do beds, I don't think you'd have to worry about it in containers.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to use my big old pots that I've got. I've got them all outside sitting there empty.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great place to start.
And I think if my patio holds all my plants and water, I'm sure it'll be
You're
fine.
good. Yeah, you're good to go.
So if I were to do a zucchini out of one of my big old pots, is that something like the lettuce that you were just talking about? Would I have to contain that at one point with the root system? Or, I mean, if you were to really think about what I'm about to embark on, there's a lot of questions that come up, right?
Yeah, for sure. Space being a big one. So you can get bush varieties of zucchini, which are basically bred for container growing in small spaces. Patios at apartments is kind of a primary example. Or if you're like on a houseboat down on the river. Bush variety. Okay. So some zucchini will trail out more like a pumpkin. Which takes up a ton of space. But the bush varieties, they still get large, but they're not going to like spread quite as far. So you just need a substantial pot.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's about done now. One in a felt pot. So the felt pots are nice. They caught on really strong in the cannabis industry years ago. The Smart Pot was kind of like the first patented maker, I believe, of the felt pots. And
so what is that? Tell me, what's a felt pot?
Yeah, so literally it's a cylinder made out of a specialized felt, which is permeable. So it does what's called air pruning. So once roots reach an air boundary or an air barrier, they'll actually prune themselves back away from the edge, which keeps keeps the root mass at an appropriate size for the containment factor, right? So it's not going to do what a lot of houseplants do and like coil. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you won't wind up with a root bound plant as
and
readily.
That's because of the pot?
Yeah, that's because of the pot, because of the air transference through that outer membrane.
Oh, I had no idea. That's awesome.
So that actually could be a really good option.
Yeah.
For growing inside, just to keep your plants happy in the container that they're going to be in.
Yeah.
And they're pretty affordable. And once you're done, you just roll down the edges, knock out the soil, and start over.
Oh, that's super cool. I like that. Does it when you're watering it, does it go through?
It can. It takes a good bit of water though to really like get it to leach, but I imagine you're going to have some sort of catch in place anyways. You're going to be lining the floor, you said. Yeah. So I mean, it will definitely like leach water through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. What about hanging pots with tomatoes?
Yeah, that's a good way to go.
Is it?
Yeah. I mean, I've not had a ton of success doing it, but that was one of the first things I tried when I decided I wanted to learn how to garden. So I also didn't really know a lot about what the nutritional requirements were for the tomatoes. I think I had them hanging on a porch, so they weren't quite getting enough sun. I never fed them. I was a bad plant daddy.
Yeah, well, we all start that way, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, it can be a good way to go. I would suggest not going with an indeterminate variety for that method of growing, unless you're going to be doing a ton of maintenance on it.
Yeah.
I would go with a determinate variety that's going to kind of limit its size and produce sort of a set number of fruit.
Cool. See, I love all this information because hopefully we're encouraging other people to do the same.
So do people come to you and ask you to help them like plot out their garden space and this is the space I have and this is what I want? And
Definitely. Yeah, and we do it for landscaping too. I've got, I think maybe both of you met Rick or
We
yes.
did.
yeah. So Rick has got a ton of years under his belt gardening. He spent some time in Hawaii as well, doing landscaping, and he gardened a lot in the Bay Area, and he's been gardening here in the Pacific Northwest for a while. So he helps people plan stuff out from landscaping to garden beds. My assistant Naya also, and then we get asked these questions all the time. So we have people bring in photos, and I'm like, okay, what direction are we facing? I've thought about it. I'm working on a platform for that. But we're also happy to do it because we all love plants, and we kind of like to nerd out about it, and we can't help it. It's sort of just compulsive, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you get to use some creative energy too. If somebody, especially for landscaping, it's like, this is the front of my house. Help me, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
And so we start with, okay, what direction are you facing? What kind of light do you get? What trees are around you? Does it shade your plot out? Like how feasible is it going to be for this plant to get 6+ hours of sunlight over the growing season?
And depending on what you're planting too, that makes a difference on how much sunlight.
Huge difference.
And if there's a tree and all of those things.
Yeah. So we ask a lot of questions about relational things. What else are you wanting to grow? Can you provide shade with this plant so that you can grow this other one that wants a little bit of shade since you're in full sun? Any environment, whether it's indoor or outdoor, has its own unique set of sort of idiosyncrasies that you have to navigate around in order to do what's best for the plant. Mm-hmm. Lights, they go a long way, towards letting you be able to grow in impossible scenarios.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what this one lamp, just this one light, will be able to do for a room that size.
Yeah, I want to see what it looks like.
I'm gonna. Well, I'll show it to you on the way out.
It does exist.
Anyways, it's pretty neat. We'll definitely connect you guys. That's what we do. Trying to educate people, but this is the future, really. And actually, wouldn't mind and it made me think about this, and I would love to touch on this a little bit. I heard recently that Florida had just lifted the ban to have yard gardens. Isn't that insane that there was even a ban set in place in the first place?
Yeah, and there have been some instituted not that long ago, even in other places.
Yeah. So for starters, people definitely look to see what's going on in your area, find out what's happening in your community, because that's some bullshit. I really want to start encouraging people because, we talk about climate change a lot. Climate change is an issue and something to break that down for all of us and is to actually have a yard garden. If we all had a yard garden, we'd all be helping out a bit. And that's something that we can do individually, families. And you're also feeding your family. You're feeding your neighbors. We had Pippa from Pear in here, and she helps 70, 80 kids that are on the streets a day. And so she's always, it's like squash and zucchini season. Everybody bring in your squashes and zucchinis, and that's something that we can be doing as a community. That, I just, here in Portland, I see it way more than in any other places that I've lived. But I definitely want to start encouraging you guys out there to start doing this. So we'll start posting pictures of the progress of my next project.
You said it. I was just going to say, hey, people, remember it's squash season.
Yeah.
So any surplus that you have, the people at Pear will use it to help feed our homeless youth. That was episode number 3, I believe. Yeah. They'll make bread. They'll use your surplus. So any garden surplus you have, please donate to Pear.
Yeah. So here we are. We're talking about, how we can make a difference in the planet just by even having yard gardens, which isn't and we're talking even just to start off just a couple of boxes. But there's other plants out there that actually have health benefits as well. Like there's some that purify the air, as I understand, right?
So yeah, that's based off of some studies that NASA did back in the 80s. There's a little bit of controversy out there around that topic
I wanted to ask
particular.
because I don't know.
Because there's, through any of the studies, from what I understand, and I've only read sort of the abstracts of these, I haven't like gone deep into anything that was published, but it seems like there wasn't necessarily like a great way to like monitor how much purification you're getting, like per, say, like square foot or something like that. So people are kind of like doubting, okay, like really to what degree is it helping? You know, like, and this is a true story, but we had a customer come in once who wanted to get some houseplants for that purpose because he planned on smoking a lot in his room, and he thought that the plants were going to be enough to filter that out and purify the air. And we were like, so I wouldn't recommend hotboxing your philodendron just yet. It's
He's all good.
It's only one plant, man. You know. And then the other thing is that, like, we know that they do this. Like, transpiration is a way that they're like moving moisture in and out of the plants, and having a bunch of plants together in an area will bump up the humidity and stuff like that. So humidity can help trap airborne pollutants and allergens and stuff like that and bring them down, and then potentially to the soil where they get cycled, essentially.
So what are a couple of those plants that people can grow fairly easily if they don't have your green thumb? What would you recommend just for like the health of your own home environment?
So I would say damn near anything. Plants are just going to do it. I mean, people don't think about cacti and succulents and euphorbia and stuff as being like a prime air purifier, quote unquote, but they do it. They happen to do it on a nighttime cycle, kind of like Sansevieria does, which is snake plant or viper's bowstring, mother-in-law's tongue, any of those common names. That's Sansevieria. But so the trending plants right now, though, that are kind of on the radar for that particular purpose are what are colloquially called aroids. So this is going to be a lot of plants in the Asteraceae family. Your philodendrons are kind of like the prime one right now. And there are so many different species of philodendron out there. Like your introductory ones, you'll see in pretty much any plant store, kind of the trailing varieties, like the cordatum. But then there's a lot of upright growers that aren't as viney. They're much more thick and hardy, and they'll still climb or they'll pull themselves across the forest floor with really massive leaves and a whole different array of shapes, colors, variegations, all that sort of thing. So that's kind of the one that I think people are mainly looking for right now. Anthurium is another genus in that sort of aroid collection that has a lot of variety to offer the home grower.
So many big words.
Yeah, sorry. This is a
great.
thing.
No. This is why we're bringing you on, because I would not be able. I don't know.
I was just thinking the names of the plants just sound so beautiful and sing-songy a little bit even.
Yeah, I'm trying to even think of what like a common name for anthurium is. I don't know if I know it.
Anthurium.
So you'll see a lot of them. They have kind of a very, the common ones that you find in
I'm
most
pretty sure
plant
I
stores.
have 2 of them in my room right now because I cannot kill them.
Really waxy, colorful flowers with what's called a spadex that comes up out of the middle of it. And it's
just
technically
leaves
it's not a, well, this is a colored sort of specialized leaf that we call a flower.
Okay.
Technically, it's not the flower.
I'm pretty sure I have that in my room.
Yeah, and it's kind of got heart-shaped leaves that come to like a really
and it
like
can
narrow
grow
point.
out viney, right? It can.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And yeah, I mean, I've got a few in there that I think are pretty hardy. I've got a succulent in there, and he's kind of staying alive. And I, for some reason, haven't ever understood succulents.
Cool. Do you want
I would
to learn a little
love. Can
bit?
we? Yeah,
Okay,
I would love to nerd out on that because I have no idea.
I do better on succulents.
See, I don't.
Okay, what is it that you do?
Not a lot.
Boom.
Well, that's what I thought.
Answer.
That's what I thought.
Right.
And I'm all, oh shit, maybe I need to. in there, but like how much water in there? Because I've seen
Not
my
a
other
lot.
friend douse her outside one and it's doing awesome. So I don't know. So tell me.
Okay. All right. So succulents are really, really, really good water storers, thus the name, right? Because they have a very succulent, full leaf structure, because that's where they hold their water, since they are generally native to areas that experience long periods of drought. So they have to get it while they can,
Okay.
which means that if you give it more
Too
water
much
than it
water.
needs, for especially the size container that it has, or the amount of root mass that it has, because they don't have really extensive root systems compared to other plants, they will hog all that water as fast as they can. And then once their cells swell beyond the point of storage, they rupture, and then there's no coming back from that. That just leads to tissue death. So what happens to most people is they think, oh, succulents like water because they want to be plump. And so they, very lovingly love it to death.
Yeah.
Kind of, so yeah, as long as you kind of leave it alone for the most part, give it a lot of light by and large.
So like I have 3 little ones because it's pretty common, right, to have multiple ones in one little pot. But the pot is probably, what is that, like 6 inches? And they sit on the top. So how much water would I give those 3 little succulent? They're teeny.
So, judging by your hands, it looks like they're in a fairly
Like three.
deep pot.
It is deep for a succulent, I imagine.
So that can be a little bit tricky.
Okay. Maybe
growing
that's
them
my problem.
growing them in a container, your primary concerns are drainage, and depth is a factor for how much water actually you wind up giving. Because if you've got so much more soil than you do root mass,
Which I probably do. I mean, it does drain, but
you have to add a lot more water to keep water in the available root zone, because water will go to the easiest path, right? So if there's a lot of dry area, provided that it's not, I'm going to use another word here, hydrophobic, which means that it's so dried out that it literally cannot take in water unless exposed to water for a really long time. Provided that that's not the case, the water will go to those areas of drought, which may be away from the root zone of your plants. So you have to add more water to keep enough water in the pot, and then you run the risk of overwatering your succulents and creating a root rot
So
scenario.
I would be better off giving it more drinks on the surface more often.
Yeah, I would even consider in a deep pot like that using a sprayer or a mister.
Oh, okay. Okay, so just to keep that top layer.
Yeah,
And then you're not overwatering it, but it is sucking in. Okay.
Yeah, and I generally don't like to let plants go to the point where they're communicating like, hey, I really need water now. But one thing to watch for with many succulents, especially the ones that have like a broader leaf or particularly plump, is they'll start using that water reserve over time. And if it starts to kind of like shrivel a little
it
bit,
gets wrinkled.
Yeah.
it can also do that though if it's had too much water, and that's a sign of the tissue death.
I'll
So
let you guys
you
all
kind of
know
have
how
to
that goes.
you kind of have to remember what you've done to it to
Yeah.
give you context for that.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of a good way to go.
I mean,
keeping them
succulents
shallow.
are a blast. They're beautiful.
They are, and since developing the houseplant section at Fang, I've gotten very enamored by the Euphorbia genera, which it's within like the top, I can't remember, like 5 or 6 largest genus on the face of the planet.
Wow.
And many of them grow in very arid climates where...
So can you describe what this plant looks like a little bit to the best of your ability?
Yes. So there are some that we grow here in Portland, actually in the landscape community. They're commonly known as spurge. But when I moved here, I started seeing them and I was like, oh, what are those alien flowers that the flies are always all over? And that's one form of euphorbia. They have a very small, sort of nondescript flower in a way, generally green to yellow, that grow up on many stems in a cluster. And they have sort of lancate leaves that can be totally green, or variegations are really common, so like multicolors on the leaf. But the ones that we grow inside are, they look like cacti. They often have spines, but they'll also have leaves on them as well, and they too flower. And they're remarkable because if they weren't growing in places like Madagascar and Africa and parts of India and stuff like that, they would look probably very much like the ones that we grow here that don't have spines all over them. But because of the particularities of the climate that they're growing in those places, it's known as, let's see if I get the term right, convergent evolution, where they adapted traits of similar plants in the landscape in order to compete and survive. So they've become very efficient water storers, and they have spines. This is one of the plants that you may know by the fact that if you break part of a stem or a leaf or something like that off, it will sap a white and milky latex, actually. So like African milk tree.
Are they the big one? I'm trying to think, because I drive around a lot in Portland. So the ones that are outside, are they like big spines?
Oh, no spines on the ones that we grow here, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but they'll have very big like leaf clusters that almost look like they grow in like a whorl. So like a,
okay.
like a big hand.
Okay, got you.
Yeah, I often find that like if I show somebody a picture, they're like, "Oh, those."
Right.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, every plant has a purpose. Would you guys not agree?
Oh, for sure. I mean, what's the saying, right? Like a weed is just a place growing where you don't want it. That's the only thing that makes it a weed.
I think some weeds are actually beautiful.
I do too. And I love that people are starting to wake up a little bit more too on just even dandelions. I mean, it's a good plant.
Yeah, for sure. I harvest dandelion all parts. It's good medicine. The flowers make really good fritters. If you've never done
fritters?
It. Yeah, just do like a light breading on it and pan fry it. They're delicious.
Oh my God,
Really?
that's so cool.
Yep,
so are
and
you
then-
just eating the flower part of the dandelion?
No, I eat the greens too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just cut them into salads. They're a good bitter
So
green.
you just obviously guys don't want to just go pick your dandelions anymore.
No, you need to know where they grow for sure. So dandelions and a lot of other termed weeds are really, really good friends to the garden because they will, especially dandelion, send down a really deep taproot to go mining for minerals and nutrients. And then they bring those nutrients up to the soil surface, which is where the root zone of many other plants are that can benefit from it. So they're actually doing your tilling for you.
Wow.
Isn't that so? That's very interesting because I mean, when you're gardening, people are like pulling weeds, thinking that it's going to overtake the garden, right? So,
Yeah, and I mean, in some cases that's true. Like I will pull out marigold, or some people call it bindweed.
like the ones that are a
all
little
the
bit
time.
more aggressive.
Yeah, exactly. Very
That are growing
opportunistic
quicker
weeds. Yeah, they have rapid generational turnover, so they can go through their life cycle in half the time that your lettuce does. And they can strangle out plants. So there's definitely like times where you remove stuff just because it's not really suiting your needs.
Right.
But then there's other times where you encourage them. Like for years, people were pulling out comfrey when it was growing in the garden, and
I did just hear that.
Yeah, that's another great one for mineral mining. It brings up a lot of minerals to the root zone of other plants, just like the dandelion does. But then you can hack it all back, all the leaf, which it provides ample leaf, and then use that as a mulch. And then you're kind of composting on top of your soil again. So you're adding a little bit of nitrogen back in through the green matter. And then as it breaks down and dries out, you're adding in biomass, which essentially is your carbon factor in the soil, and literally building up your soil over time.
So we're in fall right now in Portland, so all our leaves are falling. Do you recommend people bagging all their leaves? What would you recommend people do that would be a better...
I feel like you got free ground cover.
Right?
I mean, I tried that argument a lot growing up to avoid raking all the leaves, and it never got me very far.
It's kind of a never-ending battle, but it does do good. So, I mean, raking it into like a garden soiled area, around the plants, that's through this next season is going to help it, right?
Yeah, it can be good. They will break down faster for you if you can do something to kind of macerate them a little bit, but that's not always convenient. My neighbor just composts with the maple leaves that fall in our backyard, or mulches, sorry. He just covers his flower and veggie bed with the leaves, and then come spring, he brushes them all aside and then begins planting.
Voila.
Yeah, it helps keep moisture in the soil, so you're saving money on water there. Not that we need to save too much in the fall here on water,
Yeah.
but in other areas that can be a really
Well, I mean, I've
useful
lived
tool.
in California where the water is very valuable, I was there when it was the drought, so.
Yeah. The only leaves that I will actually be more purposeful in removing from like the tops of my garden beds are oak leaves because they take an unprecedentedly long time to break down.
Okay. That's interesting.
And I grew up around a lot of oak trees, so that's why we always raked them.
That's why there's poison oak usually around an oak tree, guys. My husband is so allergic to poison oak. It's not even funny.
I've been lucky there.
I have too. I actually, because I have a dog. And so when we go hiking, she'll brush up against his leg and it'll like eat his flesh. And we have to take him to the hospital and get steroids. It's insane.
Wow.
My dog can brush up on me and nothing happens.
Same.
So there's some people that are actually allergic to it more than others. So other people actually can be like fine around. I mean, I don't think I would want to go rolling around in it or anything, but
Neither. Does your husband have issues with mangoes?
I don't know. I just bought a mango today. Why do you ask that?
Find out. Because a lot of people so we harvested mango a lot in Hawaii, and the people who were particularly sensitive to poison ivy and poison oak would have reactions to like climbing the trees or sometimes handling the sap that came from picking the fruit.
So it's not the fruit itself, it's like the mango tree?
Yeah, so it has the same chemical compound in it that poison ivy does.
Wow.
I think it's
I believe
it's called
idea.
urishal. And the fruit contains small amounts of it. So some people who are hyper sensitive to it can sometimes not eat mango.
I wonder if that's in the allergy test that they can give you.
I
That's
wonder.
great. I mean, how are you to know that? I mean, unless you know more about that connection.
I must not be allergic because I love mango.
Yeah, and I mean,
have
it's
you ever
definitely
climbed a mango tree? Or I mean, I don't even know what a
different right
mango
there, 'cause
tree
it's-
looks like.
No.
But
yeah, it's trace amounts in the fruit, but yeah.
cool. Oh my God, that's awesome. Did you
things you
climb
learn.
any big old palm trees for coconuts? And
Yeah, I also got scared, like a quarter of the way up and decided to abandon that course and resorted to throwing things.
oh my God, I'm afraid of heights, so I would be completely terrified.
Oh man, people who grew up there though, like
that's
some of them
their
will
culture.
barefoot it up the trees, and then I've seen this cool technique too where they'll actually take palm fronds and they'll do sort of like a weave around their feet, sort of in a figure 8, and they'll use that kind of placing the middle of it to kind of like shimmy their way up the tree. It's really neat. There's a Samoan variety of coconut that's a dwarf. It grows not very tall at all, and it's really easy. You just go pluck a coconut. But we used to pick them up on the beach all the time. And there's many different stages that you can eat a coconut at, and each one of them offers a really different experience.
Really?
Like sprouted coconut, just when like leaf is starting to emerge from it, which you see on the beach a lot. If you crack one of those open, it looks like styrofoam inside because all of the coconut meat and water has sort of started to break down and feed the.
Sounds like a baby
plant.
growing in somebody's belly. It's like the same process.
Yeah. And it is like it's like eating a foam. It's like
And it's
a chewy
super healthy
foam.
for you?
It's delicious. It's like because all that sugar has concentrated because it's working on feeding the
So
plant.
it's kind
to
of like a
support new growth.
delicacy.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so good.
Wow.
Yum.
And then, so what's the next stage of the coconut?
So yeah, we used to cut them open every day. Like it's a big part of your diet when you live in proximity to them. And some you will harvest for the meat and some you'll harvest for the water. So we kind of got to where we were figuring out, okay, like this sounds like it's a good amount of liquid and it sounds about like it's at the right stage. So you cut that one open, pour out the water. And there's this sweet spot between when the meat is starting to kind of harden on the inside, and there's still a lot of liquid present. It has a sort of, I don't want to say gelatinous, but it's very like soft. We call it spoon meat. Like you can scrape it out with a
Wow.
spoon. It's not like the stuff that you shave for baking.
Wow.
And that was the most delicious stuff.
I might actually like that because I'm not a huge fan of the texture of the shaved coconut.
Yeah, it can be a little dry, a little fibrous.
Yeah.
You might like
It's not my
the spoon
favorite.
meat. The spoon meat's good.
All right, I'll try it.
You can
the
sprinkle it with
baby.
nutritional yeast
Or
and
the
a little bit of
baby.
tamari, and it tastes like chicken tenders.
Holy shit. That's so I love to cook, so that's awesome. And then you got the big one, right? The meaty one where we're just like the fibers.
Yeah, and you
then
won't
it's got
hear
the
much there.
coconut
It'll feel
milk.
pretty dense.
Okay.
And yeah.
Does it have coconut milk in it? when it's that big?
A little bit. So
Or is that lies on TV shows?
So the milk really, as I know the milk anyway, is actually the meat and the water blended together.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's almond milk too. I mean, it's
Right.
essentially just the water that is flavored around the meat.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So citrus plants, do you know much about citrus plants?
A bit.
I think in one of my pots, I would like to do one like a citrus plant.
Cool.
So what would you recommend?
Kaffir lime is a great one. It containers well. It grows pretty moderately, but you can use the leaves in cooking.
Awesome.
So it's kind of like a
Great.
double-lobed leaf. You'll see it, I think New Seasons, which is a grocery chain here, for those of you who don't know, carries them sometimes, but I think it's like $2 for 2 leaves. And then some of the Asian markets like Wajimaya or Fuban.
I have gotten it at an Asian market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more common there. So the lime
It's
on
good
that
in
one is really
tom kha
good
soup.
too. For sure. That's like the signature flavor.
Yes.
That and tamarind. I
And
suppose,
that's
but
why you want, it's really good. So
it's really great
yeah.
in curries too. Like
I'm
we
definitely,
made-
when I'm ready to start this, I'm coming in and and you'll get me hooked up with what I'm needing.
Yeah,
for
we've
sure.
we've got them right now. And then Meyer lemons do really well containered as well. So it's a nice sweet lemon.
You would love that in your water.
Yeah, I mean, the citrus is awesome. I mean, you can do that in dressings and
Versatile. Yeah. The kaffir lime also produces a lime, like you might guess. And it's very like gnarled and knobby, and it still has a lot of those oils that are also present in the leaf that are good for culinary applications. Like the zest on it goes a long way. If you're familiar with Rangpur lime, it looks kind of like that. It looks kind of mutant. But it's delicious. It has a ton of flavor.
awesome.
I think, right now, also, I've got a Kalamandan orange, which is a variety that kind of just came onto my radar this year, honestly. A customer was inquiring about it, and I was like, I'm not super familiar with that, but it's a staple fruit in cuisine out of the Philippines. But we have a particular variety that has a variegated leaf, so it's also really, really pretty.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I have a hibiscus tree in there, and I had it out on my patio earlier, which actually I was just connecting the dots in my mind, and I wanted to ask you about, which I know I'm not the only one out there that wants to know this. How do you shock a plant? So I have my hibiscus tree, and actually this is my second season with it. And the first year I got it, of course, it's blooming, and the flowers don't last for very long, but they're stunning. And so my tree made it. It went through its fall stage where it actually did lose a lot of its leaves, and I still kept it alive somehow. And I had a smaller one that didn't make it. But then I moved into a new apartment, and I moved it out onto this patio, so I'm in a different sun, right? I mean, that's pretty common. So it switches it up. And it just didn't like it out there. It just didn't, it wasn't dying. It was just not flowering like it was before. So I actually moved it in because I've heard that you can shock a plant, so you don't want to change its environment too quickly. Is that true?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
And there's multiple ways that you can shock a plant. Light being one of them.
Is movement one of them too? So like if you're moving to the other state, with your plants and you want to bring all your plants, is that something that can shock a plant?
Yeah, we nearly lost a Monstera adansonii when we were road tripping across the country getting ready to move to Hawaii. So that's Swiss cheese plant. It's another one of those house plants that people are often after. It's got all the holes in the leaves. That thing nearly died during that move.
Yeah.
Part of it is like you're jostling things around in that scenario. So you're kind of disturbing the root zone, and they don't generally like that too much. For that same reason, transplanting them, like if you up pot something, oftentimes you'll see it go through like usually like a 2 or 3 week period where it just kind of doesn't look as happy as it did before you moved it. And you're like, oh man, what did I do? But they usually recover from that.
So when what I did was I brought in my tree from the patio, and I brought it to just inside the door, so that it wasn't really, and of course the doors open a lot, so it wasn't like changing it from one extreme to the other extreme. Anyway, so it's back in my room, thank God, and it has been doing well, and it's actually flowering, and it's full right now, people. And also hibiscus, you can eat we make hibiscus tea, and is that the actual flower that we're eating?
So the one that you have in your home likely is not the
It's the big
hibiscus
giant
used for
red one.
Yeah, so there's a particular one that's used for hibiscus tea.
Okay, so that's good to know.
Yeah, so don't just throw any
But I
hibiscus
mean,
in there.
some of them are edible. Some of the flowers are edible. So
Yeah, and we also have hardy hibiscus that we can grow here. Like it's hardy down to zone 4, which if you don't know zones...
we don't know zones.
Okay, here. So USDA agricultural growing zones basically are kind of charted areas of the nation, assigned a number based on your average lowest temperature given at a certain time of the year. So we are zone, generally speaking, in the valley here in Portland, zone 8A. Up in the West Hills here, you move into like zone 7-ish. So Wisconsin, by comparison, is probably like a zone 4, maybe a 5, something like that. So lower the number, lower the average temperature for longer periods of time in the year. So being in zone 8 and Hawaii being like zone 10-ish, you can see how many like degrees of magnitude we are away from like a tropical.
It's not that far.
It's not that far as far as zone is
that's
concerned.
an interesting.
Yeah, so we can get away with a lot is what that means.
Awesome.
But yeah, there is a hardy hibiscus that will even grow perennially. So it dies back, but then comes back, down to like zone 4.
Well, hopefully with Manny's light, I'll be able to have like it's going to be a game changer for the room.
For sure.
I mean, I'm very excited to see just what will happen. I'm sure my hibiscus is going to be super stoked.
I'm interested once it's like full scale.
It's
and
not
hearing
going,
how
apparently once we get, I think what's going to take the longest is probably just constructing it safely.
Yeah.
So that I can just start babying it,
Sounds like a good winter project because you can start seeding things here for a season, like in that scenario, pretty much whenever you're ready. So
yeah, and I'm curious too for some of this.
I want to see it go from
I would like
seed
to I would like to see some of it go from seed to see how, because we're obviously going to be testing this light, Manny. But we'll see how quickly that happens. But even with like a citrus tree, you might want to start maybe medium sized, you don't want to go too big just because if this light works, then.
So since we're talking about a room garden, let's talk a little bit about pruning and keeping the plants manageable and not having it a jungle.
That's why I was asking him so much about the lettuce. But yes, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So an easy way to keep things pruned is by growing edible crops because by using them, you're keeping the plant pruned, which is another reason that the kaffir lime is a really good option for a citrus indoors because you use more parts of it. So fewer leaves that it has, the less it can photosynthesize at a time. So if you like harvest significant amounts of it, you can actually slow the growth rate of the plant. A little bit that way. For other things that maybe grow a little bit more vigorously or you don't use all the parts of, if it's not an annual crop, meaning that you're expecting to take it through its full life cycle in the time that you're going to use it.
So are you saying like
trees,
the summer cycle?
Yeah, exactly. Like a lettuce or something like that, or cilantro. So longer term crop like a tree or something like that, over time, you're going to need to eventually graduate it to a bigger pot, or you're going to need to pop it out and prune back some roots and prune back some branches. Generally speaking,
and you can do either.
It's not a bad idea to do both if you're going to try to keep it in the same size container for a long period of time. It's like it's what like bonsai is essentially. Like periodically they'll pop that tree out of its pot, they'll trim back roots, and then you try to take about the same amount from the branches overhead.
Okay.
Because there's sort of a reciprocal relationship there between how much root is there versus how much branch is there. There are some theories too that certain roots will correspond to certain areas of branching as well. I don't know that that's been proven exactly.
It makes kind of sense.
It would, right? But yeah, it's for keeping plants contained for long periods of time, there's a little bit more maintenance. However, you can usually leave them in place for a year, maybe even 2, depending on what its growth rate is.
So what about the felt pots? Could that just kind of help maintain the pruning and And how long do those pots last? I mean, do they have a lifetime, like a year?
A season, at least?
Oh,
maybe?
Way longer than that. I mean, if you're constantly using it and flipping it out and dumping out the soil for like cannabis crop, right? You're hucking that thing at the end and then starting over. So that's a lot of wear and tear on the pot. And so that'll break down quicker in that scenario. But if you're just going to leave something in it for a long period of time, I mean, I would expect to get over a decade out of it.
Oh my
wow.
God, that is
there you
so
go.
cool.
I'm going to be testing felt
and
pots
to
for
answer
us,
the
too.
question, yes, it will help with the pruning for sure because of that air pruning like we were talking about earlier. And if you're really
Which
interested,
is a good idea when you're doing an indoor garden. People.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you're really interested in this concept of air pruning, there's a really cool product out there on the market right now that's made from an extruded plastic, which I'm usually not a huge fan of plastic in the garden, but it definitely has its place in its applications. But this is air pruning to the extreme where, I mean, it looks like a sculpture, these pots. So it's almost like these, like, imagine a cylinder and like you took your hand from the inside and poked to the outside. And then for every row of finger impressions that you made towards the outside, you did the same thing to the inside and then popped holes in the end of that. So yeah, it looks like a space sculpture or something out of a horror movie.
Art.
Very artful looking. But it does an amazing job of air pruning because there's literally an open channel that the roots can grow into. Oops, hit the mic. And once it hits that air barrier, it'll prune itself back. So you can actually keep them in confinement for a long time. And nurseries have been really slow to pick this up because
Do you guys have it at Fang?
I've got a small sample that I got from
So you can come.
a
You can show me
representative.
when I come see you.
Yeah, I can show you. Pictures definitely help here. I think my description was a little abstract, but
Send me some links or something, and then we'll post some pictures on our social media in case people are curious about that.
yeah, it's a cool thing though because you can make it any size you want. It's they manufacture it in long sheets, and so you can basically just cut off what you need, and then with a couple of specialty parts, you can lock together a cylinder of any size. So cannabis growers have locked on to this product here in the past few years heavily, whereas conventional nurseries have been really slow to adapt.
So I have another question for Naomi's new apartment garden. This light, from what we're hearing, costs $5 a month to run, and it dissipates
24/7. By the way.
That's where I'm going. And it dissipates the heat, so it doesn't get hot. It's alternating wave. So my question is, most of us, humans are on a circadian rhythm, and I think a lot of plants are too. So even though this light, in theory, because it was designed for the cannabis industry, which just wanted to grow, and I think thanks to this lot, we have overgrown pot here in the Pacific Northwest.
It has happened.
So you're right welcome, all those states that it's still illegal. I think it might be coming from here.
I don't need to be growing a pot plant because we've got plenty here in Oregon.
But my question is for her plants, for her garden, to keep them healthy, would it be better for her to have that circadian rhythm and have the light on and then the light off? Or is it not really going to matter if she wants to just keep producing vegetables?
Yeah, that's a great question. I prefer to not overstress my plants. There are some benefits to stressing different types of plants at different times in their growth cycle to produce better crop. But generally, I would recommend like a 12 on, 12 off kind of cycle.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Because of course, I mean, it's going to be in my bedroom, so I really don't want to have to shut the curtain to sleep at night.
Yeah, especially thinking about like.
But I also don't. I think we're three people,
right?
Right. So we don't need to be producing that quickly. I'll include you. But you know what I mean. We don't need to be like, wow, I need to be But I mean, this is all going to be an experiment.
We could share our surplus with Pear.
Well, with Pear and our neighbors.
And our neighbors.
And our, our homeless community. And
maybe even Granville.
Yeah. So the caution on that a little bit is that certain plants need that time period in order to produce the crop that you're wanting, with the maximum amount of like nutrients that you're actually after. So.
All right, I am going to include you in on this. I mean, we're going to kind of come up with a plan. I mean, this is going to be kind of new, I suppose, for all of us, because we're going into the winter season, guys, and I'm excited about having walls full of. I mean, I'm definitely going to do a whole herb thing because I love to cook, so herbs is huge. I mean. But I'm very excited to make the plan with you and to learn about all these pots and the pruning.
One more quick question, and that's fertilizing or food for the plants in like an indoor garden. Mm-hmm. What's your recommendation or story about that?
So a couple of good things to know is you'll often find granular fertilizers and liquid fertilizers. Your granular fertilizers are going to need to stay in the soil exposed to water for a longer period of time to begin to break down all those constituent parts to be plant available, meaning that they can be taken up by the roots. And then the liquid emulsions are plant available right away. So I recommend using a granular when you're planting, especially for a heavy feeding crop or a long growing crop like tomato. Throwing in a handful underneath every plant that you're dropping in goes a long way to keeping nutrient in that root zone for a longer period of its growth, and then kind of mid-season hitting it with a liquid, just kind of bolster it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Does it stink?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, no. So that's why you want to put it at the bottom of the plant?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to be living in this garden.
Honestly,
so
the liquids are worse.
The liquids are worse?
The liquids are worse. Yeah, they'll smell more.
Wow. Fun. I'm super excited. We'll have to get something that smells really good, too, like some lilies or something. Right?
Not a bad thing. I mean, the herbs will help.
Because I want to bring in... I love this whole idea of creating this beautiful lit space that's alive through this. I'm not looking forward to this winter for the fact that we did have a lot of rain this year, mm-hmm. and we didn't really have that hot of a summer, and I'm feeling a little bit gypped, but I'm also excited about taking my power back and making that choice to spend a little bit of money and some time into proving the fact that we all have that ability to do that. Like here, I mean, we brought in the plant expert, at least in my local, store, which is great. But that's something that we were talking about with Manny's light and stuff. And it's just like learning. It's like we've got the corporations, we've got in this man in office right now. And sure, we can all get super frustrated with what's happening in our world, but we as individuals have the power to take control of our own lives. And so if we learn, the dream is if we learn to be self-sustained, then we're going to be doing a lot better off, right?
Sure.
So I think that hopefully other people catch on to this. Hopefully we get people excited about learning to be self-sustained, even in apartment living, and like I was saying earlier too, guys, do your homework and find out what is legal and what's not. I mean, I know a guy went to jail for collecting rainwater here in Oregon at one point, which is fucking insane to me that that's even a thing. But yeah, educate yourself, take your power back. And when you think about growing your own garden, whether it be in your yard or in your home, you're reducing the cost and the fuel to get to the store and back. You're taking out the plastic bags. You're cutting out pesticides. You're eating healthier. You're exposing yourself to the light, and you're going to be in a better mood. And the act of doing it too is something very therapeutic, is it not?
For sure.
Oh, just the gardening process.
Yeah. And then you get to take your knowledge and bring up other people's power too. And I mean, that's basically what food justice is all about. And so gardening at home is kind of where that starts. I mean, food literacy is a big deal in schools. And so the more you experiment and learn, the more you get to pull up the people around you. And that sounds like that's what you're all about.
Yeah, we're connecting people. We're talking about it.
A light bulb just went off in my head with this light, this fantastic light that we're going to change the world with.
Yeah, totally. We're going to prove people that we can do it.
But can you imagine grade schoolers having like their own little garden?
Absolutely.
Throughout the winter? I mean, how exciting would that be?
My future goals are to have property, to have my community, and to have the community garden, because I do love to cook and I want to do farm to table. I want to be a place where people seek out my food. And my dream is to have a summer kids camp for kids. And that's part of it for me. And it's going to be in this area. So we'll keep you in the loop with that as well. But I really think that it's important to teach our little ones. We're living in the screen era, and to get them outside and gardening and learning where their food's coming from is huge steps towards producing healthier children. They're going to make healthier decisions when they get older. And teaching them how to do it, they love that shit. They thrive around that, and it's super important. I think it should be actually a part of their education, if you ask me.
Yeah, it's becoming that way for sure.
So, in Portland, you see that. You see that. A lot of our schools here have community gardens, and they're out gardening, and they are teaching these kids those things. So, just depending on where you are in the world, I guess, look into it. Let's get this. Let's take action. We have talked your ear off now for a little over an hour, Granville. We could go on. It's like going down the rabbit hole. Don't say sorry. You go down the rabbit hole, and it's very fascinating. So we'll have to have you come back though and follow up, and I will be coming in, and we'll be doing the tour, and we'll be finding out the list of veggies, and we'll keep you guys all updated on that progress.
Right.
We'll show you pictures. So it's very exciting, actually, too, because you guys out there, I've never done anything like this before in my life. And so with the help of all these people, hopefully it's all successful, and we'll see.
Well, it will be a first.
Yeah. Awesome. So thank you, Granville. If you guys live here in Portland, please go into Fang. It's off Lombard. I've been going there for years. They're fan-fucking-tastic. I love these guys. I appreciate what you guys are doing so much. I appreciate that you and Nancy are friends, and that you're such kind people, and you give a shit, and you're here to educate us, and we're very grateful for you guys. So if you live here, go there. If you don't live here, get to know your local.
Come visit.
Get to know your local garden. Take a walk with the person that's running the garden department. Just educate yourself a little bit. Yeah. Just take a walk through the garden.
And don't be afraid to ask for what you want, too.
Yeah, or ask questions, and don't feel like you're going to be an idiot asking these questions, because we really, there's just so much to learn out there, but we all got to start somewhere. And so a little light and a little love and a little water, right?
That's right. That's where it starts.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up tonight. Thank you for tuning in to Let's Talk About the Real Shit. Go out there, plant your gardens. Thank you, Granville, for coming. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you,
Granville,
Thank you
for
so
all
much.
your knowledge.
And don't forget to be
a nice hole.